When we ask for a raise or negotiate a salary, we are not asking for charity. We're not being greedy. We're asking for our value. We're asking to be compensated fairly for what we bring to the table every day. You're listening to Speak Mother, a podcast about reclaiming your voice, your identity, and your truth inside modern motherhood. I'm your host, Shannon Warner. Let's get into it. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so glad you're here. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to let you know that we're going to go a little out of order with the chapters from On Our Best Behavior. I'm skipping ahead to greed today because I have something special planned for the gluttony chapter. I'm bringing my friend Hannah Koshak back to the show. She's a dietitian, and I think her perspective is going to add so much to that conversation. So we will circle back to gluttony on a future episode. We are continuing our exploration of On Our Best Behavior, The 7 Deadly Sins and the Price Women Pay to Be Good by Elise Loehnen. And as I've mentioned before, you absolutely do not need to have read the book or the specific chapter to be part of this conversation. We're using the book as a jumping off point to just examine our own experiences and our own conditioning. So today we are talking about greed. And when I say that word, I want you to pause for a moment and just think about what comes up for you. Maybe you're thinking about corporate greed, billionaires, hoarding wealth, the inequity that we see everywhere. But this conversation is about more than that. This is about women. This is about you. This is about me. This is about how women have been conditioned to see wanting money, asking for money, or pursuing financial security as somehow morally wrong, to view it as greedy. So let me ask you, have you ever been afraid to negotiate your salary? Have you ever undersold yourself because you didn't want to seem difficult or demanding? Have you ever thought, well, I should just be grateful for what I have? Why do I deserve more when so many people have less? So if any of that resonates, this episode is for you. What I've learned and what Elise explores in this chapter is that our complicated relationship with money isn't really about money at all. It's all about worth. It's about value, and it's about your perception of those things. It's about the stories that we've been told about what we deserve. It's the stories that we've told ourselves about what we're worthy of, and it's not your fault. Let's start with the obvious here. Women have historically been excluded from wealth building. It hasn't been that long that a woman could even have a credit card. So for most of history, we couldn't own property, couldn't have our own bank accounts, couldn't participate in the economy as men did. We were dependent on fathers, and then dependent on husbands, and then dependent on sons. Our financial security was always tied to our relationship with men. Just pause for a moment and think about your lineage. Think about the women in your family, and how has that shown up for them? And what did that model to you? So even though legally a lot has changed, that conditioning hasn't. We're still carrying those messages, and we're still operating from those old scripts. So think about how we're raised around money. Boys are encouraged and taught to go after what they want and to take risks. Girls, on the other hand, we're taught to be grateful, not to ask for too much, to try to be content with what we have. We're taught that good girls don't care about money, that wanting financial security or financial abundance makes us materialistic, that asking for what we want and what we're worth makes us greedy. But as I've learned on my self-development journey, and as Elise highlights in the chapter, there's a difference between worth and value. Worth is external validation. It's the world deciding what you deserve. Value is an internal calculation. It's what you bring to the table, what you contribute, what you're worth in terms of your skills, your experience, and the results that you've created. So, like I said, I've experienced this concept before, and I've been working with it for a few years. But reading Elise's take on it has reinforced just how critical this shift in thinking really is. When we ask for a raise or negotiate a salary, we are not asking for charity. We're not being greedy. We're asking for our value. We're asking to be compensated fairly for what we bring to the table every day. But so many of us can't make that distinction or don't even realize that there is a distinction. We've been so conditioned to see any financial ask as somehow selfish that we undersell ourselves constantly. We accept less than we're worth because we're afraid of being perceived as demanding or entitled. I think about my own journey with this, and before I became an entrepreneur years ago, I worked for a company that was notorious for underpaying its employees. As soon as you got in, you knew it. As soon as you got your offer letter, you knew it. But if you wanted a raise, you had better be prepared with proof that you were worthy of what I would call a living wage. And then be prepared to be absolutely inundated with work. Or they would first dial your responsibilities all the way up so that you could then prove yourself worthy before you received any kind of raise or promotion. We're conditioned to exploitation in that way, aren't we? We accept being undervalued, and then we're expected to work twice as hard to prove we deserve basic compensation. And at the time, I went along with it because I didn't think I had other options. So even now as an entrepreneur, I see how this conditioning shows up. How many times I've quoted a price for my services and then immediately felt guilty. And not that I can't deliver, but just because I felt like I was asking for too much. And how many times have I tried to justify my rate? This is the rate, but here are all the things you're getting, and here's all the access you're going to get to me, as if the offer wasn't enough on its own. It could absolutely stand on its own 2 feet and justify the price. Yet still, I felt like I had to over-explain. So I am obsessed with this idea of women and money and how what we're willing to put up with says something about how we interpret our own value and how our conditioned set points, like the level of compensation or treatment that we've learned to accept, can literally cap our earning potential. I don't have all the answers. I'm actively working on this myself, even now, but it is interesting. And it's not just about business. It's about being afraid to ask for help when we need it. It's about not wanting to be a burden. It's about this deep-seated belief that wanting more or wanting better somehow makes us bad people. But we know it doesn't. What if wanting financial security is actually responsible? What if advocating for fair compensation is actually necessary? What if building wealth allows us to be more generous, not less? There's this concept in this chapter about scarcity thinking versus abundance thinking. Scarcity thinking tells us that there's not enough to go around. Like I mentioned in one of the previous episodes, if she wins, I lose. If she gets it, I don't get to have it. That money is finite and asking for more means taking from someone else. But that's not actually true. Wealth isn't a pie where if you take a bigger slice, I get less, especially when we're talking about being fairly compensated for the value that we provide. And yet, women are especially susceptible to the scarcity mindset. We're taught that we should be content with less, that our worth is tied to our relationships, not our achievements, and that security comes from being chosen, not from what we build ourselves. I see it everywhere. Women who are brilliant at their jobs, but won't ask for promotions. Entrepreneurs who consistently undercharge because they're afraid their prices are too high. Mothers who return to work after maternity leave and accept whatever terms they're offered because they're just grateful to still have a job. But what keeps circling for me in this chapter and on this topic is that our relationship with money affects everything. It affects our choices, it affects our freedom, it affects our ability to help others. And when we're financially insecure, we make decisions from fear instead of possibility. We stay in relationships or jobs that don't serve us because we can't afford to leave. We say no to opportunities because we're focused on survival instead of growth. And it's not just about us, it's about our kids too. What are we modeling for them? Are we showing our daughters that women don't talk about money? That women shouldn't talk about money? That we should be grateful for whatever we get? That asking for what we deserve is somehow wrong? Or are we showing them that financial literacy matters? That negotiating is a skill? That building wealth is one way we take care of ourselves, our families, and our communities? But there's another piece to this that I think is really important, and it's not just about individual wealth building. It's about recognizing that the system itself is designed to keep certain people, women, people of color, anyone who doesn't fit the traditional mold, from accumulating wealth. So while we're working on our personal relationship with money, we also have to acknowledge that the playing field isn't level, that systemic barriers exist, and that changing our mindset is important, but it's not the only thing that needs to change. So like with the other topics that we've discussed this far in this series, this isn't about blame or shame. It's about awareness. It's about recognizing where the beliefs came from and then deciding what we want to keep and what we want to change. And it's about defining what enough means. Because that's the other trap that we fall into, is this idea that we should be content with the minimum, that wanting more than just getting by somehow makes us bad people. But what if enough is having choices? What if enough is being able to be generous? What if enough is building something that creates security, not just for us, but for the people that we love and the people that count on us? I'm not talking about endless consumption. I am the last girly on the overconsumption train. I'm not talking about keeping up with the Joneses. I'm talking about the difference between scarcity and sufficiency being more than just enough. The difference from having to operate from a place of fear to operating from a place of freedom. Another thing that stood out to me in this chapter was the idea that women often frame their financial worth around their relationships rather than their achievements. We think about what our partner makes instead of what we make. We consider the household income instead of our individual contribution. We measure our security by how well we're being taken care of instead of how well we can take care of ourselves. Now, shout out to my mom, because, again, supportive dad, but separate households, because she played the single mom card for so long, she taught me to always be able to take care of myself, to always have my own skills, have my own income, just to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. And I am so grateful for that. And I do think it's important. And I do think that so many women are taken advantage of inside their marriages and in their houses because they can't do anything else, because they have no options. There's nothing wrong with partnership. I'm not saying that. There's nothing wrong with shared finances or making decisions together, but there is something problematic about not having our own relationship with money, about not understanding our own financial picture, about not advocating for our own financial well-being. Here's what we do know: relationships end, partners lose jobs, circumstances change. And when we've outsourced our financial security to someone else, we're vulnerable in ways we may not realize. So, what would it look like to change this? What would it look like to have a healthy relationship with money and with wealth building? Maybe it starts with getting curious about our own beliefs and where they came from, and what we're telling ourselves about money, and what are we telling ourselves about what we feel we deserve. Maybe it means learning to negotiate. Maybe it means having honest conversations with our partners about money. Maybe it's about having both shared goals and goals for yourselves. And really talk about and define what financial security looks like for both of you, because they may not look the same. And perhaps it means modeling something different for our children, talking openly about money, and keeping in mind what kind of energy we're bringing to those conversations about money. Are we leading with stress? Are we leading with fear? Are we leading with a scarcity mindset? We need to show them that financial literacy is important, because we all know we don't get it in schools. No shade to the teachers, you got enough going on. And we need to teach them that advocating for themselves is a skill. Maybe it also means redefining what success looks like. Moving away from this idea that money corrupts, money is the root of all evil, or that wanting more makes us shallow. We can recognize and remember that wealth can be a tool for good, a tool for freedom, a tool for generosity. Let's flip the script with the corporate greed and the billionaires. Money only amplifies the kind of person that you are inside. I'm willing to bet everything that if you are a kind and generous person now, you pour some money on your situation, you're going to dial up the kindness and the generosity. If you're an epic asshole and you pour some money on it, you're going to be an epic asshole with a whole lot of money, doing a whole lot of stupid shit. What fears do you have around the type of person you think you might become if you do have wealth? I want to be absolutely clear that this isn't about becoming obsessed with money or defining our worth by our net worth. Those are not at all related. Those are not at all connected. This is about recognizing that financial security is a tool that allows us to make choices from a place of possibility and not fear. So, like always, before we close, I want to leave you with just a few questions to sit with. As always, they're not homework, just invitation to notice what might come up. So, where do you notice yourself playing small financially? Is it in salary negotiations or pricing your services or your goods? Maybe it's in your willingness to invest in yourself or in your dreams. What messages did you receive about money growing up, both spoken and unspoken? And which of those messages are serving you now? And which might be holding you back? And what would change in your life if you felt truly financially secure? Not just getting by, but secure with excess. What kinds of choices would you make differently? Just sit with those. Notice what surfaces and let that be enough. And if you're building something with your voice or you've been circling the idea, I offer focused podcast strategy sessions. It's a 60-minute session where we sit down together and get clear on what you're actually building and what your next steps are. If that feels supportive, the link is in the show notes. As always, thank you for being here. I love you. I'll see you back next week. Thanks for listening to Speak Mother. If this resonated, share it with a friend, and don't forget to follow the show so you never miss an episode. Keep speaking your truth. I'll meet you back here soon.